I gotta ask. This is something people are gonna hate me if I don't ask it. What's up with Offin?
What's up, friend? Today I present you the interview with Choice, currently the biggest BDO streamer of the West. This one was quite long, but I promise it's interesting. As always, you will find easy navigation through timestamps in the video. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video to help the channel grow by outsmarting the YouTube algorithm. Anyway, here's the interview.
So let's start. Can you introduce yourself for all the people that do not know you?
Sure. So my real name is Saverio, and that is basically a very thick Italian name. I'm from Canada, from Saskatchewan, and I am basically just a Black Desert Online player. I stream on Twitch, and I go by the username I'm Choice in the game, and on Twitch my username is just Choice.
All right, perfect, beautiful. Italian name, that's already a shocker for me. We already got something in common.
Yeah, so like my grandfather, he moved to Canada straight from Italy, and basically decided this is where they wanted to put their roots down. And so I'm a second generation Canadian born, but my father's side's Italian, my mother's side's Romanian, but I definitely grew up in a very Italian raised household for sure.
Okay, what do you mean with that?
So what I mean by that is very, very close, very, very big family dinners every single Sunday, getting together at my grandma's place. A lot of cousins, like really tight knit family, and a lot of family events. Like I still see my cousins like almost every single month, even though that it's been I'm 26 years old now, and just basically just raised right all around my family, and just always family is always like the number one type of thing. And I don't know, it's all just centered around my grandparents, and playing cards and stuff with my grandpa, playing scoba, playing all the types of traditional Italian games, and eating all the different Italian foods and desserts and stuff. So
all right, that is actually very Italian.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's a lot of second generation, third generation immigrants that say, "Oh, I'm so Italian. I eat spaghetti bolognese." But no, that is actually very much Italian culture. Okay, perfect. Interesting. What's your introduction to BDO?
So basically my introduction was almost completely blind. When I was playing this game called RuneScape with a group of friends, and it was starting to get a bit stale, and there's maybe 6 or 7 of us, and we played RuneScape, and then we played stuff like Overwatch, and we played Minecraft, and we played like just a bunch of different games. We played Terra for a while, and pretty much what ended up happening is Black Desert Online released on Steam, and one of my friends, Liam's brother named Ryan, he's like, "Yeah, I used to play that game when it came out. It seemed really cool. It was, something that you guys might like." And so unbeknownst to me, I didn't even realize this was an MMO. I just bought the game and started playing with them. And then lo and behold, wow, it's another MMO. And so since I had these roots of playing RuneScape, I played that game for like 14 years before I found BDO. Playing MMOs was like something that I did for a long time. And so it's something that I always enjoyed. And then all of a sudden we just landed on this MMO, and they eventually ended up quitting a few months down the line, but I just was hooked on the game, and I just continued playing since basically like 3 days right after it released on Steam.
And you had pretty much no idea about the game's existence before?
No, I had never heard of it. I didn't do any research on any of the characters. I didn't do any research of the end game. I had nothing going into it. I literally just bought it, started playing with the guys, and I started just like learning about what the game was like. Even picking my class, like the very first class I picked was Berserker, and it's a class I currently still play. And I made my decision based on the little hexagonal map that shows you that's good at like attack and defense and combos and mobility. I literally made my choice based on the looks and that hexagonal map. So I was as newbie as you could possibly imagine coming into it.
Did you try any other class, or did you just start with Berserker and went with it?
No. I mean, I made Zerker as my very first character, and I didn't make anything else. The other characters I made were like witches and stuff for boss alts, but they literally just sat there at level 13, and it was only until like a few months ago where I made a ninja level 60, and that lasted all of like 5 days, and I'm still just playing my Berserker.
Is it something that you find common for you in MMOs? Because you said you played RuneScape for a long time, then Terra, stuff like that. Do you always pick your first character and you stick with it, or is it just something that was a coincidence in BDO?
I mean, RuneScape was like, so I did play Terra for like the 1 month, as I mentioned, but that really doesn't really tell you much. The only other MMO I really did play was RuneScape, and RuneScape wasn't really a traditional like MMO that was about choosing different characters, and I hadn't even heard the term re-rolling before until BDO. And that's because RuneScape is all about building one character up, and if you want to be a ranger, you just level your range. If you want to be a mage, you level your mage, but it's all in one. So it's not a normal thing, I guess. Like, this is the first MMO I've experienced where it's actually a process to choose to play some style that's different, because it was all built in the game that I played beforehand. So yeah,
Alright.
no real history.
Mm-hmm. And you were the first 62 Steam player, right?
Yes, that is right.
I was. How did you? How did that happen?
Okay, so when I first started the game, I'm a very competitive person. So like, my background in RuneScape was, I used to, for a period of time, I was ranked number 1 in RuneScape. I was the first player to get 99 divination, which was like a new skill in RuneScape 3. And I spent a significant amount of time getting that first. Like, it was like a huge race that lasted over 9 days, where there was basically just a lot of sleepless nights and whatever. And so I'm a pretty competitive player. I was going for like max XP in that game. So coming into BDO, I was a very competitive player, again, trying to find, okay, what can I compete in this game? And it's like, okay, well, Steam just came out, and I saw that number 1 growth over my head when I was on a Steam server, and I'm like, wow, I want to be number 1 in this game for growth. And so I just started going crazy, and I got level 61 very, very quickly, but it was really unverifiable whether I got 61 first on Steam. And it probably wasn't the case, because I kind of was like half still playing RuneScape while playing BDO, so I was like not really putting my heart and soul into it when I started. But eventually I just totally dropped RuneScape and just went full on BDO, and that's when I just started pressing really hard for XP. And I really love Gyphins, and when Gyphin came out, I just spent a ton of time grinding there and grinding pirates, and I just really wanted the number 1 growth icon. So that's how it came about.
And actually, before we move on to just BDO specifically, I'm kind of curious. You say you played 14 years RuneScape. That's a long time. That's probably most relationships, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how do you quit a game after playing for 14 years? What went through your head? What were the reasons? Was it just BDO's my new best friend? You dropped the RuneScape, or how was the process?
What it really came down to is, in RuneScape, there isn't really much of an end game, I guess. Like, the progression is finite. You eventually will get the best gear, and then you just start saving up for stuff like party hats and random things that just don't matter. What I liked about BDO is its progression seemed infinite, in that you could play the game and not reach a gear cap. And what's also really nice about it too is I felt like my progress and time and effort that I put into the game was the payoff was the PvP. And whereas in RuneScape, the payoff was more of like, okay, I guess you just get more money, you get more items to flex on people. You do some bosses. They're just, the payoff of the time and investment that I put into that game just didn't feel as rewarding as BDO's PvP system did. So it really was a factor of my time and effort in BDO felt like it was going towards something I had a lot of fun in, whereas in RuneScape, my time and effort just kind of went towards seemingly nothing, just going for cosmetic goals that are just there.
So, well, now you play BDO, left RuneScape. Did you ever go back, or did you quit cold turkey?
I hung on to it for a very long time. Like, I played I played RuneScape and BDO at the same time for about a month, and from there I didn't cancel my RuneScape membership for like almost a year and a half after I quit BDO, because I was like, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back, and I just didn't go back. And so I eventually came to the hard reality where it's like, okay, I can't keep doing this. Partway through it, I ended up giving away GM of my guild to my co-GM, or they call it owner and co-owner. So I give it to my co-owner. I sort of like separated my ties as much as I could with the game. And then eventually I just realized, you know what? I guess I'm not going back as much as I thought I was, as much as I thought I was going to try to finish getting max XP in that game, which I was really only a few months away from. Like, I was like legitimately 3 months from quote unquote, like beating the game essentially. And I just the motivation to go back was just not there, because it was all just cosmetic. There was no payoff. So it was hard, but yeah, it was not exactly cold turkey. It was a lot of months of convincing myself I wasn't coming back.
Thinking about it now, I think I had a very similar reason to play BDO, or at least to not play other games. I was really into Guild Wars too before starting BDO, and Guild Wars had the same exact approach to endgame. You reach gear cap and then it's just cosmetics. And I think one of the biggest appeals, as you said, is infinite progression. Do you think this is like sustainable on the long run? Do you feel like this constant need for progression and kind of chasing, I guess, a carrot on a stick, you could say? Do you think this is healthy for the game? Do you think eventually is ever gonna stop?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, I guess. The thing, there's definitely different types of players that caters to. Like, the hardcore player definitely appreciates the infinite progression type, I suppose. And the way that BDO sort of handles it is, even though the progression's essentially infinite, by the time you're starting to get those very marginal gains, not only does it cost billions and billions, it's also giving you like 3 AP, which doesn't really make you that much stronger than somebody that spent significantly less time on their character. So they kind of handle it in an okay different way, where they make it where the hardcore player that's going to get full Tet accessories and full pen armors and Kaffir's 9 and all that stuff is not that much weaker compared to the insane player that's going to get like hard cap. So in a sense, I feel like it is okay the way that they do it. I feel like the biggest misstep that they probably ever made was stuff like potentially Berserker, where it's no longer a side grade and it's no longer a small upgrade. It's like a big thing, and it's like a pretty. You start to get very significant advantages when you start releasing items in the game that are so much stronger compared to their predecessor. So if the long and the short of it is, I feel like they did a good job, and I hope that they keep on with the current path that they're on, just maybe not releasing such hardcore upgrades like Berserker. And yeah, it's kind of my guess.
I think both the Berserker and Dead God are pretty significant upgrades compared to what we've seen so far. I guess you have to, because it's without a doubt BDO attracts a lot of people that want to have a massive advantage over other players through gear. It's definitely not a secret. And as you mentioned, that gap slowly gets smaller and smaller the more you go forward with endgame. So I suppose Prelabase is trying to figure out how to make everyone happy.
Yeah, and it seems like the way that they're trying to cater to that is by releasing things like the seasonal servers, where players can play in a capped gear state as much as they want, really, because there's going to be always a season. They got the T1 Node Wars, which is great for people that just want to participate in Node Wars but don't want to push gear really hard. They're coming out with ways to cater to that more casual player, while also leaving the main game to exist like Siege and higher tier Node Wars with uncapped gear and people's progression. Feel like.
Now that we're talking about progression, you have out of gear, right? So how much gear score you have right now?
By the end of this month, I should be 700 gear score.
All right, that's
Right
decent.
now, I'm 697.
Not too bad, not too bad. I wanted to hear your thoughts about the progression now compared to the progression when you got most of your gear. Because one thing I've noticed is that I've been playing BDO since day one, and it was almost always wrong to be ahead of the curve. As in, being ahead of the curve required a ridiculous amount of effort for very, very little gain. Arguably, now that all the pen accessories have a much higher price compared to before, Caphras are 3 million and they're not in the market anymore, boss gear is more and more expensive. I would argue that it's exactly the other way now. People that manage to get, well, not hardcap, but pen accessories and C9, C13, C whatever, are now, I'm not going to say an unreachable state, but it's definitely very much different to buy a pen accessory for 30 billion or for 100 billion. It's quite significant.
Yeah.
To kind of, I guess, give you a easier question to answer, what do you think of this gap that got created?
I don't necessarily agree with it. So I think that the better model is exactly what had existed in the prior year or two, or year or four, or however long BDO has been out, where yes, the players like myself that spend a ton of time grinding, we are getting our marginal gains ahead of players. But if we stop trying, we can quickly fall out of, high gear score status, I suppose. And so I think that that's a better model where they make better and better and better money per hour things. And eventually the game just gets, more and more inflated and you're making more and more money per hour. So that way there, a new player that's starting, if let's just say for 1 year, if I was to stop playing BDO, in the future, you would think in 1 year, someone should be able to catch up to my gear, even though I've spent, 3 years on it. And I don't mind that. I feel like that's the healthiest way to continually attract new players to the game, is by making it not such a daunting mountain to try to climb to catch some of the end game players. That's the entire reason I came into BDO when I first started learning about the game as well, is like I realized, wow, these players aren't really that unreachable. Like I can reach the level of gear that these players have. And so to now flip that on its head and say trying to reach my gear right now is almost unfathomable, because it's like almost 1 trillion silver worth of gear, and it's like you're looking at it like, wow, I have to spend 10,000 hours of grinding in order to get this. So I think it's just bad. I would prefer the old method where the time spent now is worth less than time spent in the future. I think that's a better method.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, so let's talk about guilds. You were famously in a Black Rose member, and I think you moving to Snake was, at least from EU perspective, was a pretty big deal. Also in NA, I would say the siege scene is still a lot more relevant compared than EU. Can you walk me through your experience with guilds in general? You say you started in a small kind of casual guild. When did you join Black Rose, and what was your experience there?
So I've been in 4 different siege guilds. I'll quickly do a brief run through of what I've been through. So I was in Derivation, my very first guild. It was a Node War guild. It actually did at one point participate in a couple of sieges. After that, I was in Art, and then I took a brief stint in sailing guilds just because it was too lucrative. And then I was in Barcode, which is a very strong NA guild. Black Rose, which I joined in 2019 in January. So it was like January 17th, 2019, I believe. And I left like the end of January in 2020. So I was in there for almost exactly a year. And then I ended up switching into Snake. And that's kind of where I've been since January, or since actually February is when I joined.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, why is every NA streamer in Snake? What's up with that? Is there a reason? Do you think it's a coincidence?
I don't know. You know, I like to. I can only tell you why I'm in Snake and why it seemed like a better option to me than Black Rose was. So there is definitely a lot of drama that happens in the siege scene, and being a part of Black Rose is sort of seen as the villain of the siege scene. Like they're the ones that are like trying to, you know, push people out of castles, and they're the ones that are, you know, they're the antagonist, right, of the whole thing. And so I found that being a streamer in that particular guild, it gets difficult sometimes because you're getting caught up in the dramas. You're the one, you're almost like the representative at that point, where anything that ever happens, they're looking at you like, "Oh, what do you think about this?" Or and then you're just having to basically be a spokesperson for something that you're really not involved in. Like I was never an officer in BR. I just showed up to wars. I had no idea what was going on in terms of placements. I had no say in what happened, but I was still the one that a lot of people thought that I was the co-GM of BR. But I wasn't. I was just a regular member that had nothing to do with anything. And so that causes all types of issues with things like, first of all of the shit talking and stuff that happens in streams, all of the stream sniping and stuff that happens because you're in like the antagonist guild. And it just got to a point when Successions came out that I wasn't enjoying PvP, and I was like having to PvP all these Succession ninjas and all these broken Successions, and I was just not enjoying PvP, and the siege scene I just wasn't having fun with the way how broken Successions are when they came out, to the point where I was like, I just needed to get away. And so that's what ultimately led me to leave BR, is just not wanting to have to be so involved in those dramas. And Snake has kind of always been a guild that just kind of takes a region, sits on a region, doesn't really go really hardcore in the politics. Like we definitely have, I guess, allies in the sense that we have like ceasefires on certain guilds, but it's sort of like a you don't bug us, we don't bug you type of situation. And so it's just like a really easy guild to be a streamer in, because you always got people that are going to back you up. The guild's not there to cause drama. They're not trying to make anyone mad. You know, BKill is very good at keeping the peace, I guess, and as a result, it just ends up being a really just chill guild to be a streamer in.
All right. All right. And what do you think of all these big streamers joining the, well, I would say specifically the NA scene of BDO, but even more specifically, they're all joining Snake, it seems like. Has anything changed for you? What's your opinion on it? Talking about, of course, Soda, Dyrus, QT.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, all of that is just Snake propaganda. Like at the end of the day, uh BKill likes his streamers. Like he knows that, I guess he understands that, you know, advertising your guild through streamers is a very good way to keep your guild strong. And so whenever there's like, you know, people that come into the game that are streamers, they always somehow end up in Snake, or we're the first people like to get an invite on them, or, you know, it's always said that, yeah, Snake's the most geared guild in the game, or BKill promises like a tier 10 payout. Like I'm a cutie pie, got a tier 10 payout and got like 100 mil for free and stuff. So like BKill sort of leverages the idea that Snake is like the strongest guild and the most geared guild, and, you know, we'll give you these payouts so that they can essentially advertise the guild through streaming. That's my interpretation, but I obviously have no real connection to like, he's never said that. That's just sort of my interpretation, is like, you control the media, you control the world type of thing. That's sort of what it feels like.
Do you think that devalues the guild in a way, or do you just see it as straight up a marketing move that is just good? Do you think the guild is less I guess exclusive to get in if a normal member would, let's say, get kicked out just to make space for a streamer?
So I don't think in the history of Snake, as far as I know, there's ever been anyone that's been kicked because a popular streamer pops up and all of a sudden, you know, is going to take your spot. I think that there's just an opening that happens in the guild, and there's people that are like already on the fence about leaving, and they're just kind of waiting for their replacement or whatever, and then boom, it pops up. I don't think BKill's ever kicked somebody because they're like, oh well, looks like a new streamer's in town. Like for example, Soda Poppin started playing BDO recently. I don't think anybody is gonna get kicked from Snake if he decides that he wants to join Snake, or BKill decides he wants to invite Soda Poppin. I don't think that's ever happened, but I don't necessarily think it devalues the guild, because the criteria for joining Snake has always been very specifically either be really geared or be like a popular streamer. That's kind of what the guild's always been like, and I think that most guild members accept that.
Okay. All right. And how? What's your opinion on all these big streamers joining BDO? Because isn't it the first time? We had Shroud and Summit play the game some time ago, but they seem to never really stick, right? It seems that overall BDO gives them a lot less views, so it's not very sustainable. But I've seen at least Cutie Pie. It seems to be staying in the game. You also have, I guess, a more direct contact with them, playing the same region and being, I guess, in the same guild. What do you think of this? Do you think it's a long-term thing or just something temporary?
I definitely think that I think it's a temporary thing. I actually thought it was going to be way more temporary than it actually turned out to be. Like, I thought that they would be done with the game long ago. The thing is, to go, I guess, on the business side of Twitch, if you're a big streamer, if you play in a category where your views are like dominating that particular category, there's very little room to grow your stream. And so from a business perspective, to like be like Soda Poppin and have 20,000 viewers, and you're streaming in a category that traditionally has 5,000 viewers, you're not really getting new viewership. You're basically feeding off of your followers that you already have. Whereas playing as a big streamer in Among Us or in League or in Fortnite, you are actually you're 15,000 viewer streamer amongst a 200,000 viewer category. So there's room for growth there. And so I feel like the reason why a lot of big streamers don't stay in the BDO category is just because it's basically attrition. You are slowly dying. Your channel is going to be slowly dying the longer you stay in BDO and not staying on top of the hype categories and the new things, the new trend. So I think it has less to say about the game and more to say about their Twitch careers in general.
And talking about Twitch careers, you are, I would say, probably one of the, if not the biggest BDO streamer currently. Why are you the biggest? Why is it going so well for you compared to all the other streamers?
When I started streaming, I paid a lot of attention to the BDO category. I was paying attention to what days, what times, when is the BDO category most popular, what are the streams that are getting the most types of views, like people like watching Enhancing, people like watching Node Wars. I paid attention to a lot of that. I paid attention to people's titles, and I paid attention to how, I studied basically Moreland stream and Vert stream and D Jules, and I watched all the big streamers, and I basically tried to understand what is the attraction to their stream. And I tried to take, I guess, a mixture of all of those big streamers and try to place it into my own. And that's kind of how I started, I guess, by just paying attention to so for example, Wednesdays and Thursdays. When I started streaming, those were the days that had the least viewership in the BDO category like a year and a half ago. And I just decided, okay, I'm just never streaming on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I also realized that, okay, if I stream late at night, viewership is lower than if I stream in the early evening. So I just never stream late at night. And I just sort of paid attention to that stuff and tried to be a personable person and tried to make sure I was always going for goals and making sure that I had a new command in my title. That's actually a pretty big thing, honestly. A lot of people don't realize. I haven't been doing it a lot lately, but having a new command like Tet Tungrad Ring or like Pen Begs or whatever, like having that command of you getting a new upgrade or something that happened you're going to get a lot of people just clicking on your stream to look at that command in general, and they'll probably end up, sitting in your stream as well for a while. So having like a new command every week was something that I tried to do. And I did that for like 6 months when I first started streaming. Is like every week I wanted a new command, something new for people to come and look. And from there, my stream just pretty much is gear carried at this point where, you got the fancy full pen in the title, and that just continues to bring in. That's kind of where I'm at. And the other thing too, this is actually something I remember that's really important, is when I started streaming, I came into the mentality, like I started with the mentality that the first impression that the player has of you, or like the viewer has of you, is probably like really important. Just like in real life, first impressions matter a lot. And so I tried to make sure, like, it was actually kind of stressful, I'll be honest. When I first started streaming, I stressed myself out a lot about it. But making sure you're constantly entertaining, because you never know when that new player has clicked on your stream, or that new viewer has clicked on your stream who knows nothing about you. And so I kind of always wanted to be as purely entertaining as I possibly could be at all times when I first started streaming, making sure I was always doing entertaining stuff on stream, because I knew that I'm making first impressions like every minute. There's a new first impression. And so I really stressed myself out a lot over that when I first started streaming. But now that I'm more comfortable with it, and now that I actually have built a viewership, you can sort of like there's a lot less stress on you to feel that way. I still want to try to do entertaining things and try to, have a great time, because the more that viewers are having a good time, that means you're probably having a better time as well. So I like to do fun things that I enjoy doing on stream instead of, things that I don't really want to be doing too.
I guess a follow-up question is, did you start streaming with the intention of becoming a full-time streamer? Do you think streaming BDO it's sustainable in the long run for a full-time streamer career?
Yeah. So to tackle the first question of did I intend to be a full-time streamer? Not really. Like when I started streaming, I had just like graduated from university, and I was just sort of applying for jobs and stuff. And I wasn't really in a rush to do anything crazy. And I just thought, you know what? I want to upgrade my computer, and I'm going to use the parts from my old computer to make a stream PC and just start streaming, because I had just joined Black Rose like in January, and I started streaming in February. I was like, you know what? I do well. I top frag in Node Wars. I feel like I have a good amount of knowledge. Like I had dipped my toes into life skilling, and I just thought I had something to offer to the BDO community in terms of, being able to stream my adventures. So I didn't intend to be a full-time streamer. My intention was to get partnered. That's what I really wanted, is just to get partnered. And then from there, to answer your second question of, is BDO like a sustainable career choice, I guess, or like a sustainable thing as a full-time streamer? There's a few full-time streamers that are in the category. I definitely think that it's not a luxurious living for like a lot of people. Like it'd be hard to be a full-time streamer in BDO for sure. But it comes back, I guess, to you can very easily, I guess, make your footing in a category like BDO because it's not super oversaturated. And then from there, the logical step would be to transition into something else. Kind of like the discussion we had earlier about, Soda Poppin' and, being the most popular person in that category. Very little room for growth. At the current, average viewership I have of like, 600 to 700, there's very little growth right now in the category. And so do I eventually think I'm going to, move categories? Eventually, but I want to move to like maybe Crimson Desert or whatever the next big MMO is. I want to stay within the genre. Do I think that BDO is going to be like the forever category? I don't think any game is truly forever, but there has to be a reasonable replacement for BDO before it makes sense to actually try to move somewhere else.
You went to Korea. You went to South Korea with Perlabis. Can you talk about that experience?
Sure. So it was a really surreal experience to even just be invited. Like I had only been streaming for maybe 8 months and things took off really well. And I got a message in like October saying, hey, we want to invite you down to Korea for this event called G Star. and you would have to, start leaving early November. So I had about a month's notice that I was actually going to head to Korea, and it was a really, really cool experience where essentially all of the streamers, they all had different flights, and then we all ended up meeting in Seoul in basically an airport, and we got picked up by four. I think it was either three. I think it was four different Pearl Abyss employees, and the one main guy who is you can consider him like the social media manager. I don't really know what his official title is, but his name is Ran. And so we met up at this airport, met them for the first time, shook hands. Like, it was really cool meeting like Morlin in person, and Blade Boquez. Like, oh my goodness, dude. When I met Blade Boquez, he's like a mythological creature almost. Like, like the way that he carries himself on stream is the exact way he carries himself in real life. And like, to meet him, I almost felt starstruck when I met him. It was crazy to meet him for the first time because he was like one of the first big streamers that I watched when I started BDO. And so like, trying to keep it cool, like not trying to fangirl too much over him and whatever, but it was really cool meeting, fellow streamers and whatnot. And we got to go on this like hour-long bus ride when we first got to the airport, and we had some we stayed in this hotel that was like I don't even know how many stories high, but we stayed there in Seoul, and just seeing the difference in, I don't know, the city just was so different compared to where I live, right? Like, I'm from small town Saskatchewan, which is in Canada. It's just like a farm province, basically. And so to go to like a big city like Seoul, and, the whole tons of people living on top of each other, and there's like big apartment complexes and like all this other craziness going on there. It was a really, really interesting, experience. And we ended up eating dinner on like the top floor of this one place, overlooking like the city and whatnot, and it was just really, really, really cool. I don't know, yeah. It was awesome.
What was your experience with Pearl Abyss?
I actually got the pleasure of being able to tour the Pearl Abyss headquarters on the second day that we were there. And so, to give you a little insight about the headquarters, I guess, it's in a really tall building. It's probably like, I want to say it's like, I don't know, 20 floors high or something like that. You entered, and they had a little picture area where you could sit on a bench with a black spirit and take some pictures, and they changed it through the seasons. So if any viewer or any buddy that came by on any particular season had a different picture. And there's like a front desk which had security cards and stuff, so you couldn't get in, and the security guards at the front, they had a nice cool little there was basically this little, it's not a diner, it was more of like a canteen in a way. It wasn't something you would sit and eat food, but you could get a lot of refreshments. It was like kind of like a cafe, I suppose. And it was all Pearl Abyss themed. Like, all of the entirety of the menu and everything was all like little black spirits on it, and you got it in these little black spirit printed cups with like black spirit like little heat things so you don't burn your hands. Like, it was all really, really cool. And they have a whole big cafeteria that was on like either the second or third floor, so everybody just ate for, presumably, I think, for free, that worked at Pearl Abyss. And we actually got to tour some of the like, they had a little arcade there that you could, if you wanted to take a break and like play some Street Fighter or some Pac-Man or stuff, they had that. And then they had basically these fogged glass doors, and those were key card entry only. We didn't actually get to experience like any of where the workstations were, where they were doing things, but we got to, every once in a while that door would open up, and you could kind of peek inside and see what the heck's going on in there. And one of the coolest things I think that I saw is, I actually saw somebody that was watching a streamer. It wasn't a Korean streamer. I can't really say who it was. I don't actually know, but they were just watching a streamer. And it was a really, really cool thing to see. Like, wow, Pearl Abyss actually does watch streams. And it was really cool to meet some of the developers. I got to meet Jae-hee Kim, who is like the CEO, I believe is his title. And just got to meet like some of the main guys who are in charge of essentially I don't even know how to explain their title. Essentially, there were people that were supposed to take the different ideas of different regions, like like how different regions felt about different things, and relay that information back to KR. So I met like two different people like that were directly involved in understanding NA and understanding EU, as well as like ACA and JP, and then relaying that information to KR. So just knowing that, hey, they watch streamers and they actually have people that are, paying attention to what NA and all the types of regions want, was a really, really cool thing to know that they had people assigned to do that. Like that was their entire job, was literally just making sure that, the things that happen in NA and EU in different regions are actually heard. And that was a really cool experience.
The legendary siege monitoring team.
Yeah.
Did your opinion of PA changed after visiting them? Do you think you learned something new or exclusive by being there? And has any contact remained after this experience?
So when I went, I had a very negative opinion of Pearl Abyss in general. I felt like a lot of what we said didn't matter. I felt like they only cared about the Korean community. I didn't think that anything that we said or did really mattered. That opinion did change. I just think that Pearl Abyss is very slow moving when it comes to giving feedback and advice. Like, it was awesome to be able to sit down with developers and talk to them about, issues in NA and issues in the game in general, and things that are, pressing on players' minds, at least, in position of where Morlin, Joe Never Fails, and myself were, as well as Blade Boquez, in terms of like how the things that affected us most as players. But it also takes a long time for that type of feedback to make it to the game. Like one of the things that we were like, we would really love to have more group content, like more group areas to grind together, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And giving that feedback directly to developers in November, it took like 6 or 7 months till we actually saw a duo spot emerge. And so it takes a long time when you give advice or give, or express a concern, unless something is game breaking or like very cause for concern. It's going to take like at least half a year to a year for them to do anything about it. And so it seems like they might not be listening, but then all of a sudden a patch comes out later and it's kind of like finally. And I feel like they do listen. They're just in a lot of cases too slow. And I feel like there's a lot of examples of that. One of the most prominent that I can think of is sea monster hunting. Like imagine sea monster hunting was like said to be extremely powerful and players complained about it a long time. It existed for like half a year to 8 months before anything was done about it. And it just seems to be that's their turnaround time on any new feedback that comes in, is like 6 months to 8 months. So I don't necessarily think that I think my perspective on them changed. Like, I don't think that they're just straight up not listening to us. I just think they're slow. That's kind of what it's come down to. They need to be much faster. I think that the number one thing that could benefit Pearl Abyss as a whole is just have a quick response team that's sole job is to just react to things that need changing like right away. And I feel comfortable in saying that I think that classes like Succession Wizard, let's say, that have existed for so long and have not gotten changes, I feel like down the line it's probably going to end up getting a nerf, but it's just taking so long. Like, it just seems like the turnaround time on things that are pressing are just so slow, and it almost seems like they're not listening because it takes such a long time. But I don't know why things have to take as long as they do. I really truly wish that they had a team that was dedicated players that actually played the game, have those players in different facets of the game and how they experience it, like have a mid game player, an early game player, and a late game player that works at Pearl Abyss and knows the struggles of all the different facets of different players that exist in the game, and try to just work one by one on like the most pressing issues. And if they could do that in a quicker turnaround time, I feel like there'd be a lot of the negative connotation that is associated with the words Pearl Abyss would actually go away pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's move to that too. Let's move to class balance. What do you think of the current PvP balance of the game?
I think it's not balanced. I guess like it's hard to say PvP balance because I don't think it is.
Well, has
I
it
think
ever
that
been?
yeah, I'm not sure if it ever has been. You know, like everybody thinks about the glory days of PvP, when, you know, before Awakenings and stuff. I'm not sure. I never really played before Awakening, so it's hard for me to comment on that. But in terms of the current balance of the game, I think that I don't necessarily mind the time to kill being rather high. You know, with the new HP journal and the new DP brackets, time to kill has definitely gotten a little bit better. But generally speaking, I feel like the individual problem is actually with the classes themselves and not necessarily in the current meta of PvP where, you know, people do die quickly. And if this is truly the vision that Pearl Abyss has, where people are going to die quickly and do a lot of damage, then there's definitely a lot of classes that need to be reworked to, you know, exist in this meta. Right now, we have a lot of classes that are struggling to do anything because they can't deal with the fact that any class that didn't get a good succession has fallen behind, and any class that got a really good succession is just like completely dominant. And I don't think it's really that much of a secret to say that, like, you know, Valks play Succession, DKs play Succession, Witches play Succession, Wizards play it, Ninjas play it, even Hashishins play it. Like, the majority of classes that got a Succession are playing their Succession. Mystics, Strikers, like almost every class is playing their Succession. It's actually pretty rare to see any Awakening class. And so they're trying to buff up Awakenings in order to make up for that. But I feel like we're going to be in a really weird spot here in the meta currently, or like in the meta when they release these new bond skills where you can choose one CC for an Awakening, where classes like Awakened Warrior, which are already really good, are going to end up even better. And so I don't like the blanket patches that they decide to do. Like when they blanket decided to change class modifiers, and when they blanket decided to just make huge changes overnight. Like the game has such a fine little balance to it that if you make huge changes all at one time, you just flip everything on its head, and then you just get so much to deal with. Like I feel like they should be more slowly flicking switches and making changes to classes, and not just so rambunctious with just like making mad changes all at one time, because I feel like that's producing like very muddy into them.
Mm-hmm. Since you are the biggest, one of the biggest Western streamer, and you have definitely a big audience and probably quite a lot of influence with your opinions about BDO. You also are making class tier lists, which I'm sure are influencing a lot of players. Do you think you have influence in the game? Do you think your opinions or what you say can actually have influence in the game, in terms of balance, in terms of what PA actually does?
I think it has. You know, specifically the podcast that I do on Tuesday, that particular podcast, there's been a lot of stuff that we've spoken about on there and have subsequently got fixed. Like, to name a few, we talked about how there were weapons like black stars and stuff and pen distortion earrings that were made by hackers, and all of a sudden how they were getting RMT'd to different players and whatever. And we talked about that, and they ended up taking it out of the game. We talked about like tier 10 dream horses that have, you know, fancy looks to them, and not necessarily crazy functionality, but just like a cooler look. And now we're getting the Dream Pegasus. We've talked about different, just like there's a whole bunch of examples. I'd say there's probably at least 7 or 8 examples of things that we've talked about on the podcast that have ultimately made it into the game. Now, some of that might be coincidence, and some of that might be, I know that like Cacao, specifically Enlave, he watches almost every single one of them. And when Good Vibes Guy was a CM or a GM of Cacao, he actually had me sending like meeting notes essentially back to him to say like, this is what we talked about on the podcast. So I feel like a lot of what gets talked about on the podcast and feedback like that, I feel like it definitely is listened to. And so not everything, but I definitely feel like that's one of the biggest outlets. I personally feel like the biggest influences that I think that I have is actually things that we talk about during that particular podcast. And a lot of it seems like it is considered. Some of it's probably thrown out the window, and things that we can't make up our mind on are probably not that useful. But the topics that we actually come to a conclusion on, those seem like those are the ones that, you know, actually are actionable items. And I think a lot of it is Cacao taking note of that and sending that feedback to BA.
I think Endlive is one of the best thing to ever happen to BDO.
Yeah, him and Good Vibes Guy. Like, I'm very happy that Good Vibes Guy was there for the time that he was there, and I'm very happy that Enlave kind of filled his shoes. It's always good to have a very passionate player and, you know, CM GM that's like looking out for the actual players. So for that.
To follow up on what you mentioned about RMT, pen distortion, in my interview with the Estimate, he said that 80% of endgame players on NA do RMT, some sort of RMT. What is your take on this? Do you think it's actually this prevalent?
I guess it depends what you consider an endgame player. If you're talking about like RMTing, so right now I feel like there's probably very little RMTing that exists in the game for like endgame pen accessories specifically. And the reason I think that is because there's just so many buy orders. Like there's a lot of buy orders out there, and there is just no, like, let's say for example Bassi belt, right? If you were to try to RMT a Bassi belt, there is usually orders on it. And if you're actually trying to RMT an item, I think you can kind of tell if an item gets min listed, there's probably, like exactly what he said, 80% of the time, if there's a min list item, it probably got RMT'd. As the new prices were going up for distortions, one got sold at 94 bill, that was probably an RMT'd item. When a Black Star gets sold, that's, especially if it gets sold at min price, that's probably an RMT item. There's definitely a lot of RMTing that goes on that is spoken about in any of the siege guilds that I've been in. At one point or another, there's been a discussion about RMTing for rare items. And so I don't know if the number is 80%, especially right now. Definitely when the new market came out, and, you know, for example, there is this player called Hoija in NA, and his whole he doesn't really play the game anymore, but his whole thing was buying Sea Monster Hunter payouts. I would be in a guild called Sailors. I would be doing 60 hours worth of sea monster hunting, and this guy would join the guild for 1 hour, get payout, and leave the guild. And then he would join some other guild and do the same thing. Like, there's zero chance that he has 2 alts in those guilds and he's sea monster hunting and getting payouts on one character or whatever. So, like, there's definitely RMT all around in endgame player base for sure. But I think that a good portion of them are probably just super whales. Like, I know of very endgame players that just buy a whole bunch of costumes and tap for a bunch of pens and stuff, and that's the way that they get things. But I definitely feel like the first year of the new market was probably RMT central. That's like where a lot of RMTing took place, is when there was no buy orders on those particular items, and you could get them at really cheap prices and get them at min lists. And I feel like the RMTing is much less right now, at least.
If you're comfortable with sharing this information, how much do you spend in the game?
Generally, I look back probably about half a year ago, and the trend that I'm on is around $100 per month is generally what I spend on the game, and that includes the initial cost of like starting the game. And I've actually made a lot of mistakes when it comes to paying the win. So my biggest number one mistake is having like 14 tier 4 pets. It's an extremely stupid amount of pets that costs a lot of money, and it's because I wanted life skilling pets as well as combat XP pets, and then I had like special pets and stuff. And so a lot of money went on pets, but generally, on an average, if I've played the game for, let's say, 40 months, I've probably spent $4,000. That's about where I'm at.
All right. You've been doing something kind of unique, which is leaving your guild to do node wars in other guilds. That is something that is, I would say, definitely unique, especially when it comes to NA, with such a culture of doing siege. I want to hear like why you're doing this and how's your experience been so far.
Okay. So part of the reason, so when I ended up leaving BR, like Black Rose, I had to decide, okay, what guild am I going to join now? And a lot of the two decisions, like the two stronger guilds than BR, like the natural progression, I feel like, of any guild is you usually just go upwards until you're just completely done with Siege, and then you just don't want to be in it anymore. That's typically what players tend to do. And I kind of wanted to do that same thing because I felt, with Odalita and new grind spots and stuff, I wanted to be in a guild that spent a lot of time grinding. I really like the community of Snake, and I just wanted to be a part of them. But this is paired with the issue that Snake is one of those guilds that sits on region like 90% of the time. Snake is, since the beginning of the game, since the beginning of Siege, I think there's been, I don't know, maybe like 8 months they've not been on a castle or something in total. Or not even 8 months would be actually crazy. 8 weeks maybe. It just seems like every week that you lose a castle in Snake, you're just back on the castle the next week. And their streak has been as high as like 44 weeks before. They've literally almost sat on it for like a year. So part of being in Snake means sitting on a castle a lot. And so for a player like myself, I really enjoy Node Wars, and I feel like it's what validates my time is like I said earlier, I enjoy the combat in the game, so my time is validated by the fact that I really enjoy PvP. So for me to sit on a region and not be able to participate in Node Wars is something that I really didn't want to do. So the best of both worlds scenario that I created for myself is I Node War 3 days out of the week, and then I rejoin Snake, and then I stay in Snake for 4 days out of the week. It lets me do Siege in there. It lets me, have some time to chill and grind without getting distracted with Node Wars, and some time to have some fun. So that's kind of the reason I do it. And honestly, in a lot of cases, it really sucks. I dislike the idea that I can't be a part of certain GVGs during specific times. I dislike the fact that I no longer have a guild chat. I don't get guild buffs. Sometimes it can be lonely, just like, grinding and not seeing any messages pop up at all in your message box at all. Like having to, if you have to send out a compass to somebody and like, oh, I'm not in guild right now. And then, it's always just a little extra hassle. I really don't like doing it, but I think that Node War content is something I enjoy enough. And I feel like people that watch my stream enjoy enough to the point where I couldn't give it up. So that's why I do it.
Okay. I gotta ask. This is something people are gonna hate me if I don't ask it. What's up with Offin? What's up with Offin and in general the difference in gear choices between EU and NA? What's your take on this?
Okay, so if the question is why do I have an Offin? Well, when I bought my Offin, I bought it for like 6.7 bill. And by that time I purchased my Offin, there was so few of them that had hit the market that Zarkas were already up to 10 bill. Like, this is new market. Zarkas were up to 10 bill. Offins were like, I bought mine for like 6.7 bill or something. So I got a really good deal on it. I also like that it was blue and matched my day, so that was nice too. Okay. Other than that, I also felt that Berserkers have a lot of accuracy. Like, our passive is literally just straight up accuracy. I think we get 14% just existing. And then we have some good accuracy mods on our abilities themselves. We have abilities that give us 15% accuracy for 10 seconds that we activate during our combos. We have negative 12% evasion debuffs that we put on our combos. We have 5% accuracy add-ons. By the time you are, like, in the first 3 seconds of your combo, you've essentially debuffed the target for like 12%, and you're hitting them with, as well as buffed up accuracy skills by like 40%. So you're really quite the evasion killer as a Zerker. And so I never really felt the need to get a Zarka because I felt like my damage was always really good. And the fact that I have, you know, a lot of Caphras in my gear and a lot of pen accessories means that my accuracy is generally higher than most people that are using a Zarka anyway. And so I just felt like, because my gear was always ahead of the curve, that I just had the best of both worlds, a lot of AP and just a lot of accuracy in general. Now that I've switched to evasion, though, I definitely am noticing the accuracy loss of Libers, and I do eventually aspire to get a Pen Black Star. So that is something that I'll definitely be doing in the future. But in terms of gear differences between NA and EU, it seems like in EU, it's for certain in evasion meta where I think you guys understand that evasion is stronger than DR when you have a lot of gear. And the way that you guys combat that is by getting a bunch of accuracy accessories and stuff and trying to make it so that you're never going to have to do more than one combo on a player or whatever. Whereas the way that NA operates is like, okay, if I'm going to sacrifice AP, I'm not going to sacrifice it for accuracy. I'm going to sacrifice it for even more evasion. So now you're a player that has, you know, let's say you're a 305 AP with full AP accessories, but then all of a sudden you switch to a bunch of accuracy and now you're, say, 289 AP, just full on accuracy. If you're somebody like that, well, instead of me at that point just putting on more accuracy to combat their evasion build, I just put on even more evasion so that I combat their accuracy build. So it's just like, you guys stack accuracy in relation to evasion, whereas players in NA just stack more evasion in response to your evasion. And it eventually turns into kind of like a wet noodle fight in a lot of cases, where then eventually someone has to take off a piece of evasion gear. That's kind of how it turns out in NA. But generally, the reason why I'm not going accuracy accessories is because I find a lot of value in having accuracy offhands. Accuracy offhands are insane. They give really good evasion and super high accuracy. It's way better trade-off than Dawn's. It's better trade-off than even the new Toro belt coming out. Better trade-off than the new rings. It is the best trade-off in the game. It's like literally 5-1. The only better trade-off is literally a Zarka compared to an Offin. Yeah. So my end game build personally is trying to hit 301 AP with a Sayer, which is my accuracy offhand, and having like 500 accuracy while still having 300 and 1 AP, eventually 305 if I get a Pen Berserker.
So I have 3 questions from people from my Discord. Katakito-kun asks, have you ever thought of rerolling?
Almost every day. Okay. Almost every day I think about what it would be like to play a class that truly realizes the true potential of having a lot of gear. So being in a meta where evasion is very strong in comparison to DR and playing a DR class, it hurts a lot seeing how tanky strikers and mystics are compared to Zerker. And then on the same token, seeing the ranged potential of like a succession wizard at all times compared to Zerker, like, 30 seconds out of every 3 minutes. That hurts as well. So I think about it a lot. With this new whole tagging thing that's coming out, where you're going to be able to tag and swap gear, I'm definitely looking into playing a succession striker where I can, play my Zerker in Siege and Node Wars, but for open world stuff, if I really want to just like basically just be a complete just gear check people, striker is like the ultimate gear check class, and I look forward to being extremely invincible.
Okay, so I guess somewhat relevant. Reckon asks, do you feel you don't have to put time and effort into getting better at PvP due to your gear?
To an extent. So I would say 90% of my fights, I can completely just win based on gear. I don't fear getting CC'd. I don't fear doing something unprotected. I oftentimes will try to just practice doing finesse type things just because I know that if I get CC'd, there's no consequence. 90% of the time. The other 10%, though, is against real players that actually can kill me. And in those types of fights, no, I definitely think that it's a kill or be killed scenario in that regard. The gear helps, but when you're fighting a DK with 300 AP, there is no surviving whatever the heck they want to put like whatever combo they're going to put out on you. So at that point, you just have to really play very safe.
All right. So 2 out of 3 people that I interviewed got permabanned right now. And Gorda Carino asks, if you were to start again from scratch because my interview gets you banned, what would you do? Would you start from scratch?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I wouldn't. I probably would not start playing BDO again if maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not. I think that I would continue to play BDO even if my main ended up banned. And the reason for that is I still do enjoy a lot of that BDO has to offer. The only difference would be is I would never try to be a competitive high-end player again, in the sense of trying to get enough gear for Siege or, trying to do anything outside of just having fun on seasonal Arsha as well as participating in tier 1 Node Wars. That would probably be enough for me to enjoy the game. And I would definitely not spend as much time grinding and, putting effort into my gear all over again, because I've always been a player in games that I do not like negative progress. I don't like having to do something more than once. And so for me to have to do my entire gear setup all over again and spend the thousands of hours of grinding all over again, it doesn't sound like an attractive. So I'd definitely be a much more casual player, and I would take advantage of as many gear capped activities that BDO has to offer as I possibly can, and maybe appreciate the more casual things in life. Like maybe I'll actually play through the Papu and Creo. Maybe I'll actually get a Carrick. Maybe I'll do these other things that I've always wanted to do, but felt like I don't really have time to do just because I just have to always be grinding.
Okay. All right. Do you have any final words or any shoutouts you want to do?
I don't really know what your audience is in terms of like new players versus existing players, but in the case that there are new players playing the game, or new players that are considering playing BDO, I think you guys should definitely give it a chance. It's honestly one of the best combat systems of any MMO, and you don't have to be, especially with season characters, T1s, like I was mentioning, you don't have to be a hardcore player in order to enjoy the game. So I think that if the bad press that the game has got in terms of pay to win is really irrelevant when it comes to seasonal servers, and it's honestly really irrelevant when it comes to tier 1 nodes. So I think that if you're on the fence about playing BDO because of what you heard, there's outlets to not ever have to worry about that part of the game. So try it out. That's pretty much it.
All right. Thank you so much for doing this interview. Super appreciate it. Hope you had a good time.
Yeah, I mean, I got 2 distortion earrings while we've been talking, so it's going good.
Making gains. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much then, and have a good day.
Yeah, thanks for having me.